Thanks for meeting us again on October 8th, 2021. Today we'll be talking about Carla Danes. Tell us about Carla. How did you first meet her?
Well, I guess it was around 2005, and I'm teaching classes, printmaking and etching classes at Santa Monica College, and Carla signed up for one of my classes. And we hit it off right away, just as friends would. And she signed up with another friend, Ann, who is also a very good artist, and Hurley. Anyway, she signed up for my class, liked it, signed up for my second class, the etching class, for 2 semesters. That's all they could sign up for at the time. And she was very enthusiastic and good at what she was doing, so I asked her to be her and Ann both, to be a teaching assistants, so that they can come in, help me out, help with the students, and also use the facilities, because in printmaking it's a communal environment. It was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
They were both. Ann is multidimensional in that she has made some film work, she's made installations, made prints, she's done some paintings, and Carla is more of a sculptor and installation artist and the printmaking. So they hadn't taken it before, but they really took to it, and they, with printmaking, some people get it right away and some people take a long time. They both got it very quickly. Carla had gone to Otis Parsons and got her degree and developed her art there. And Carla's work, I think, is feminist related in the sense that everything belonged to the woman. But at the same time, the woman was the domestic end of the marriage or the relationship. So Carla, I think, works from that perspective. She was, before she moved to California here, she lived and worked in Manhattan. And she had a school. And so she always talked about how she really enjoyed working with the children and how they were very creative with the school, and she really felt that was her life's work at the time. She was born in 1945, right after the war, and after that time, and I remember myself being born in that generation, a couple of years after that life was new, but it was plastics. Mm-hmm. Everything changed from wood and metal and organic materials to plastics. Everything. Your carpets, your drapery, your utensils, your cookware, your clothing became synthetic. Belts, buttons, bangles, bulbs, you name it, made out of plastic. And all these colors that were fabricated colors, not real colors in a sense, but shining and plasticized. And so Carla was always enthralled by those and attracted to those. And if you walked into her studio, you'd think you was in a hardware store for plastics. She has hundreds of shelves and bins, and she buys in bulk buttons, bangles, plastic flowers, plastic streamers, cups and utensils and beads, all kinds of plastic. And they all have a shiny quality to them. And it's a glittering kind of thing. So I think in that sense she's enamored, or she was attracted to that, and uses those objects in her sculptures. Now she's really a great sculptor. She makes these composites, and she glues these different plastics, and they have some metals and things in there too, but most of them are shiny and have this surface to them. And she makes these compositions, some very large, 8-foot tall things, and some 3-foot diameter circular things, and they look like a wreath you'd put on the door at Christmas time, but they're all plastic items and glued and stapled and sewn together. And so she puts them under glass, she hangs them on the walls. Some of them are freestanding, so she really works with plastics and the colors. She's really in that mode. And her monoprints look just like her installations in the sense that she uses, now she's using the colors in the ink, she uses the plastic items as stencils and lays them out in composition. They look very simple, but it's very sophisticated and complicated. And over time, I've watched her for years now, and in her studio, and then working in my studio weekly. She's in here. She's probably my most avid attendee of the workshops and the classes. She's here continually, and so I've seen her work evolve into it's gotten more sophisticated and complicated. But what she does, she's just selecting something and putting it down, and then she'll wait and she'll move it over. And then maybe she'll print that, and then, she'll come back on top of it with something else so she's creating a composition as she goes along. So her ideas are created from the objects that she's using sometimes. So some of her prints look like underwater seascapes, and some of them look like candy store counters. You know, when you're a 5 or 6 year old, you go into a candy store and you see, and your eyes light up, and you see all these bright things, and you can taste them. Well, I know she can taste those things when she's making them. I know. And I've seen her work for the last 15, 16, 17 years now, and it keeps evolving. It's almost like process art. She sits down and begins, and it grows out of that. She sees things and smells and tastes, and I know she's using all of her senses there, because I use some of mine when I'm around her work. And so that's kind of what I like about her work too, that it's engaging, and if you spend some time with them and then read into them a little bit, you could follow her train of thought. And what I like about Carla, she takes chances. As an artist, if you stop taking chances, you're dead. You're dead in the water. You're doing the same thing over and over. She looks like she'd be doing the same thing because she's working with the same medium, but it's continually changing. Ongoing color, and each piece has a beat to it, a rhythm and a beat, almost like a music or a line of poetry will have a beat. And
How can you distinguish that beat?
by just looking at it. And me, I'm always looking at prints and artwork and deciphering them. How were they done? Why are they doing that? Because I've been a teacher and a printmaker and a collaborator for all my life. So that's what I do when I look at other people's work, and especially when I see them working. Not just their work on the wall, but as they're working too. And I see her working every week. With her etching, she's a little different. She begins with a theme, a more conceptual idea. And she'll have drawings, and she'll have numerous drawings, and then she'll try and put those together into a composition. And sometimes she uses multiple plates, putting them together for one image. So she approaches it a little different, a little bit more from starting with, like I said, a drawing, conceptually have ideas or themes or thoughts that she's using. I love her etchings. When she gets into doing her etching work, she becomes mindless. Also, when she's making her sculptures and her monoprints, it's kind of looks like she's mindless working. Just moving things, her eyes and hands and things like that. But when she's doing an etching, many times she spends days scraping, burnishing, erasing marks that she put into a plate to get rid of the thing so she can add something else, or just eliminate it altogether. So it's more physical, because you got to go back in and make these changes and go back into the acid, then make a print, and then come back again. So you're with the monoprint most of the time when you put things down, you print it. That's what you got. You can come into it and add or print over it somewhat, and you can always add color or collage onto it and things like that. But most of the time they're pretty complete when they're finished, especially her sculptures, of course. But the prints, she's continually working that plate. Continually. She'll work on an image for a month at a time and do it a couple of days a week. So she has a lot of patience also.
Do you want to talk about some memorable experiences you've had with Carla after knowing her all these years?
Well, I've worked with her so much in the shop, mostly when we get a print finished, there's that aha, because she'll work for a month sometimes, and a couple days a week I'll see her working on these prints, scraping and burnishing, re-etching, proofing, etching again, changing the color, changing the position, removing something, adding a sheen collé. So all those experiences together make up one.
All those aha moments.
All those aha moments. But I will say one thing. She helps everybody she can. She's, people are always asking her and taking advantage of her sometimes to do things for them or to utilize her space or her yard or her throwing parties in her place. And she's a great party giver, by the way. She has a great yard for barbecues and for big crowds, 150, 200 people. She's just a outgoing, warm, very creative artist with pizzazz and generosity. I think it was the second semester she was in my class, and she'd come in. She was very quiet. She sat at the back, and I kept hearing somebody like crying. I thought someone was outside crying, or a girl was crying or something. And so I went through the class. About halfway through the class, I walked around to the back of the room, and I walk up to where Carla was sitting, and I hear this, and what's going on? And we weren't allowed to have any animals in classes, but she had just gotten that day or the day before a puppy, and it was named Bella. It was a little dachshund poodle, tiny little dog, and she had it in her basket purse, and it was closed up, so I couldn't see it, but I heard it, and finally I just looked at her and I realized what was happening, and I just smiled at her and I walked away because I think, and then she told me after the class, she says, I had to bring him because we had just gotten that puppy and we couldn't leave him alone, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss the class. So that was one experience that I liked talking about.
Yeah.
And then I got to know that doggy for years and became my good friend.
Yeah, and she's a nurturer for sure.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Carla loves all the helpers and assistants we have here. Carla loves kids and young people. So if you're a kid or a young person, you're getting a lot of love from her.
Well, she loves you too, John.
Yeah. So she's just a great artist, and she's created some pieces that were left in permanent collections and deteriorated, because you think plastic is a permanent thing, but once the sun hits it or the atmosphere, like any old plastic, after 10 years it gets brittle. So some of them aren't permanent, but they're beautiful pieces. That's all I can say, and they're very, very evoking. And especially if you look at them with a conceptual mind in question. That's Carla. That's the Carla I know and love.